The Cincinnati Bengals complete the sweep of the Cleveland Browns to set up a meaningful game in Week 17.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm Jake Lisco. He's James Rapine. We are Locked On Bengals on the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast. Welcome back to the everydayers and those of you who make us your first listen, and welcome into the new folks who are tuning in because, well, the Bengals find themselves still on the fringes, but in the playoff conversation here late in the season. We will break down what the biggest takeaways are from the Bengals' victory over the Cleveland Browns. They sweep the Cleveland Browns for the first time in the Zach Taylor era, first time since 2017. We'll get into that today in an episode brought to you by FanDuel, where when you win your first $5 bet, you get $250 in bonus bets. Check it out at FanDuel.com to get started. And James, big margin on the scoreboard, 24-6, in a game that at times felt more distant and at times felt closer than the score indicated. What were your big takeaways from this game?
That Von Bell earned every penny of that league minimum contract that they're giving him. Honestly, I'm serious. I mean, I don't know if they win the game for sure if that goes the other way. It's such a change in momentum. And Jerome Ford has the 66-yard run. And it's like, oh, the Browns are going to go up 7-0. And Zach Taylor described it as you don't want to be going uphill against the Browns. And we've watched the Bengals do that with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. They suck at it. Running uphill against the Browns is not a place you want to be if you're the Bengals. It's weird. It's why they haven't swept them since 2017. Myles Garrett's a big part of that. And so for Von to make that play, which is a huge play, he forced the fumble. And then for the Bengals to go 99 yards, a historic drive, doing that on your first possession, it's just huge. It was so that's it. That's the sequence. Once that happened, I was like, oh, they're not losing today. Even when it got weird and it was 7-0 longer than it should have been. And then in the third quarter, when things got a little stagnant and it's 17-6 and the Browns are closing in the fourth quarter, making it a one-possession game, and then they didn't. We knew the Browns were bad coming into this game. They're not a good football team. But they have enough talent on defense to make it ugly. Especially if you get off to the start that it looked like the Bengals were going to get off to. So when you flip that, you went from being down 7-0 to being up 7-0. I thought that was the game, essentially.
Forcing Dorian Thompson-Robinson to beat them by throwing the ball. He threw 34 passes in this game. He threw more passes than Joe Burrow in this game. He had more dropbacks than Joe Burrow in this game. Like, that's not where the Browns want to be. And not only that, part of the way the Bengals got there is by completing the deep ball to Andre Yosevich against Denzel Ward. And I remember complaining about that the first time these teams played. They took the deep shots a couple times when they were there, but it was Andre Yosevich against Denzel Ward. And this time they take that shot again and it pays off. And Jamar Chase, of course, gets his numbers late in the game. But I would describe it as a very opportunistic game for the defense, right? Making the plays in key moments, as we've seen them do in years past, where this year they're only doing it against bad teams and against bad quarterbacks. And they did that today. Dorian Thompson-Robinson showed that he does not pass the Bengals defense litmus test. He is not an NFL quarterback. Finishes 20 for 34 with 2 picks, just 157 yards, takes 5 sacks. We'll talk about some of those young defensive players on the defense as well. But you're right that the fumble to start the game, which blows my mind, that was ruled a touchdown on the field, by the way.
Insane.
From the replay.
How?
Like,
How?
You're guessing. They're guessing. Like, it's anyway, we don't need to go too far down that path. The ball never crossed the line, and it was out.
Not even close.
A couple things there, right? But anyway, a huge play from Von Bell, obviously, to keep the Browns out of the end zone. But then after Amari Smith leaves the game and the offense starts to stagnate in the third quarter, like you're talking about, where the Bengals have a chance to just blow the thing open as they receive the ball to start the second half, they stayed opportunistic. And the Browns got into the red zone again and had a chance to make it a one-score game. and they get the great timed blitz from Lou Anarumo, freeing up Geno Stone as a free rusher. The Browns don't pick it up properly. Geno Stone forces a terrible throw, and Jordan Battle is there to collect. Jordan Battle, after a terrible first play of the game where he's directly involved in that 66-yard run for Jerome Ford, not the only one at fault, but one of the ones at fault, had an awesome game after that, from run stops to coverage plays to that interception. And it's not like a difficult interception per se, but he caught the ball, had a chance at another one too, where he and Jermaine Pratt are fighting over what should have been the Bengals' third pick of the game. The overall response from the defense after getting punched in the mouth on the very first play of the game was there. The caveat is this is still the dead cat bounce. This is still a very, very bad Cleveland Browns team, a terrible offense led by a bad quarterback. And so the Bengals have their work cut out for them against, by comparison, a much more real NFL team than they faced in a few weeks in the Denver Broncos next week. And we will talk about that plenty in this upcoming week and what that means. It will mean something, certainly. But I think that without trying to be too much of a Debbie Downer here, you do still have to take the results with a grain of salt. Like you enjoy the results they've gotten the last few weeks against some bad offenses in terms of takeaways, in terms of getting some sacks from young defensive linemen this week. But let's see if they can do it against some better teams here down the stretch. Their strength of victory this year, James, is like 223, lowest in the NFL. They're beating teams with an average record of roughly 3-12 this year. And so we'll see what they can do down here. But this is who they are this year, and it was a great game for the defense today, but I guess I am just doing the Debbie Downer thing. You got to take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah. It doesn't matter. Irrelevant. They can't control who plays quarterback for the Browns. Doesn't matter. The Browns have beat the crap out of the Bengals with a bad quarterback since Myles Garrett was drafted. That's why they haven't swept them since 2017. The Browns have had one good quarterback season since then. One. And it was Baker Mayfield in 2020. Yes, 2020. Outside of that, they haven't. And so, yeah, I think that's fair to be like, all right, well, it's still significant. I think it's significant. You shouldn't lose to the Browns in this situation. I get that. I understand that. I also think that Geno Stone has played better. And, yeah, they're going to be tested for sure. But so is the offensive line. They're going to be tested at a different degree because it's not just one guy that you're going to be able to focus on. Like the Broncos are pretty unique, I think, with that. And the Browns, I think it was all about 95 and making sure Myles Garrett didn't wreck things. So there's a lot of time to discuss that. But for next week to matter, they had to get today. And they had to find a way. And I do think that, again, if they don't make those big plays, especially on the first 5 minutes of the game, I think the entire game is different. And I also think that the week 3 Bengals defense, I don't know if they get carved up by Dorian Thompson-Robinson, but I think that they give up a touchdown in the fourth quarter to Dorian Thompson-Robinson. I don't think that it's 24-6. I think so I do think they're playing better. To your point, how much better? And I don't think anyone can really answer that. And the only thing that they'll be able to do is be able to answer it starting next week. But winning 24-6, being in control, bouncing back after the worst start that you could have imagined if you're the Bengals with a 66-yard run to Jerome Ford, all of those things are good signs. Now we'll see if that can continue, because all of the things that they did for most of today, create chaos, tackle, keep everything in front of you, not give up big plays. It's not like Jerry Jeudy was floating down the sideline wide open. You need to make sure that happens moving forward. And if so, I can accept that from the defense. And so we'll see where they're at. You're right. It'll be a good measuring stick next week, but the past 2 weeks, they've been fun watching the turnover barrage. 9 turnovers in 2 games, Jake Lisco. It's like a bad Madden opponent that they've played over the past 2 weeks.
Creating turnovers is awesome. I think it's hilarious to say that it's irrelevant to say that the Browns offense is bad when talking about taking this defense with a grain of salt when you look at the teams they've beaten this year. So I'll say that. I think it does matter, the quality of opponent, because every time they faced a quality opponent, they haven't been up to the task. We'll see if that is the case next week. But like you said, we will have plenty of time to get into that conversation.
It's irrelevant because they haven't swept the Browns when they've sucked. That's why. The Browns have sucked last year, and they didn't sweep them. They got their butts whooped. And so that's why it's relevant. It's not like it's new for the Browns to have a bad quarterback. They haven't had a quality starter, Pro Bowl level quarterback in my lifetime.
The Browns were 11-6 and went to the playoffs last year despite having a really bad offense. So still a playoff team.
Okay.
Coming up next, let's keep the conversation
Did they have a good quarterback?
Like on this game. More to talk about next.
Today's show by Prize. Watching the game, you're going to love PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy. Whether it's football, basketball, or any of your favorite sports, PrizePicks makes your holidays bigger and brighter. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on PrizePicks. Plus, this holiday season, they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Picksmas and offering 2 free picks in December. When your picks hit, PrizePicks makes it easy to cash out. You can get your money in as fast as 15 minutes. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly when you play just $5. PrizePicks, run your game.
The Bengals complete the sweep of the Cleveland Browns, which is significant. That is certainly relevant. I think that we can talk a little bit about this Bengals offense in this game as well, because a big part of the issue when the Bengals have faced the Browns in years past in this Joe Burrow, Zach Taylor era is the inability to get things going on offense, especially early in games. That's what you mentioned when Zach Taylor talked about not wanting to run uphill against this team. And the Bengals got off to as good of a start as you could have hoped for. They were running the ball well. They had tendency breakers on their scripted drive. Joe Burrow started this game on fire. Jamar Chase making plays, T. Higgins making plays, Chase Brown making plays. And that's the kind of start they needed against a bad offense, against a clearly not NFL level quarterback, and gave them the margin of error they needed and gave them the opportunities to play the way they needed to play on defense to create turnovers down the stretch. I think you're spot on in that analysis, James.
Well, Chase Brown had 56 rushing yards on that opening drive, and that was huge. Joe Burrow was 4 for 4 for 41 yards. And it's like, what? Like you go on a 99-yard drive, and that's how it is Chase Brown has all of these explosive runs. And so, yeah, I think that was the biggest difference from week 7 to now from these two teams is Chase Brown, his emergence, their confidence in him, what he's been able to do on offense. And it mattered early. And it was a big separator. Heck, on their final touchdown of the game, just being able to get Chase Brown going some help them and help facilitate that drive a bit. So yeah, I think that's the thing that stands out to me. Obviously, it was a record-breaking season for Jamar Chase, and he has the touchdown at the end to get over 1,500 yards for the season. He's the only Bengals receiver to do that. Joe Burrow, multiple records. You could say he's the first Bengals quarterback to throw for 4,000 yards in 3 seasons in his career. Andy Dalton did it twice. Carson Palmer did it twice. Obviously, the Bengals throw it a lot, and he super efficient today, 70+% completion percentage. And then Jamar Chase as well. With what he's been able to do touchdown-wise, he's just one away from Carl Pickens. So these guys, I could do the three touchdowns and 250 yards in 7 straight games too for Joe Burrow. Like, they're just unreal. And so for them to get those numbers today, and I know one of the touchdown was a garbage time touchdown. It's so much fun watching them. And I think Chase Brown helps them solve some of the issues that this Browns defense does give them, along with T. Higgins being just awesome, because I thought T was really good today as well.
When you can chuck off explosives in the run game and be efficient outside of that, Chase Brown averaging over 5 yards a carry. He finished with 5.1 yards per carry. He led the team in total offense on the day with 109 yards, just narrowly beating out Jamar Chase's 104, if I can do math, which I think you never know. You never know when you try to do math, but it was a great day for Chase Brown. When you have those 3 guys and Chase Brown making plays as a receiver and as a runner, that can carry the offense. And that's really what it was today, because while they protected well early, and I noted that, man, they've protected Joe quite well through the first few drives of the game when they were going well on offense before things kind of sputtered. before Marius Mims went out of the game, that eventually ends up covering up for the offensive line down the stretch on their final touchdown drive, which, as you said, is kind of in garbage time at that point. But with backups at tackles, with shaky guard play, and just Ted Harris out there, they still had moments of success, and that's largely, as it has been for this entire stretch lately, Joe Burrow making plays, Jamar Chase making plays, T. Higgins making plays, Chase Brown making plays, and then getting the ancillary contributions from Andre Yosevach and Mike Gesicki.
Yeah. Andre, huge play, I thought. And, Mike Gesicki nearly had a big first down. And if he was able to stretch it out, by the way, one of the plays of the day was Drew Sample. In what Joe did to get Drew Sample the ball, like the little twisting throw. I mean, Joe's just insane. I mean, the touchdown pass to T, look, his knee was down, just for those wondering. Like, it was touching, but he tripped over. It was Cordell, I believe.
It was Ted Karras. It did not matter because he wasn't touched by a Browns defender. Yeah. Took a lot of people a while to figure that out. The broadcast never mentioned it. I noticed it immediately and tweeted about it. Eventually, I think Mike Pereira tweeted about it as well.
Yeah. It was one of the officials, or one of the former officials that are making a lot of money to talk about it on TV now. Yeah, it's crazy to watch him do stuff like, and he's done it all year. And so if going back to the defense, if they can be just opportunistic, where they're the 20th best defense in the NFL, but they force a couple turnovers every week, and you're getting the ball back to that guy with those weapons, that's tough. It's tough to stop. It's tough to contain. And we've been saying it all year. So hopefully, if you're a Bengals fan watching this or listening to this, you're hoping that the defense has figured something out. Because if so, that's scary. I mean, there's obviously questions about the offensive line and health with the Marius Mims and all that. Like, there's questions. But boy, oh boy, does Joe Burrow have a lot of answers. And that's proven again today against the team that has had his number. And now he's won back-to-back games over them in the same season for the first time in his career.
Yeah, that's a nice milestone for Joe Burrow. If there was any kind of monkey on his back, which I don't really think there was, it certainly should be off at this point. And despite some pressure ramping up from the Browns in the second half, you have to be generally pleased with what Joe Burrow did in this game. I would say that it wasn't his best game of the year, and it might have been his worst game in the last 7 weeks or something, but that is still a really good game. It's still 250 plus and 3 touchdowns. It's still making insane plays outside of structure. The big difference in this game to me was the Browns did a good job, a better job than we've seen in a few weeks, of keeping Joe in the pocket a few times, which is why he ends up taking 4 sacks in the game. And that's credit to the Browns. Some of that's Myles Garrett doing his thing, right? Some of that is other guys on that defensive line maintaining gap discipline when Joe's trying to escape the pocket. And then one of those was the play action play from the 1 yard line that I knew drew the ire of some Bengals fans. That call in particular, at that point in the game, people are yelling, just run the ball, just run the ball. Why are we throwing the ball in the second half at this point? They were running well early. And in that spot, that's a turnover that you just can't have if you're Joe Burrow. But again, when you have those kinds of issues in games where you're winning comfortably, you end up winning comfortably, and he does plenty of good. Like, Joe Burrow is still awesome. I'm not saying that he had a bad game. I'm just saying that, compared to some of the awesome games we've seen from him, those mistakes are still there. And it's just doing way more good than bad to balance that out in a very positive way.
Sure. Yeah. It's going back to the Cleveland quarterback conference. They would love to have a guy that turns it over once, 23 of 30, 77% complete, right? Like, you would love it. But in that instance, he knew he was in trouble. He didn't get down, tried to extend, tried to put that Superman cape on. And sometimes you really are on a phone booth. And he was in the phone booth, and it got ugly quick because there's multiple guys around him and nowhere to go. And that's the balance. And we'll see over the next 2 weeks now. Must-win games. You're going to face interesting rushes. You're going to face a defense in Denver that's really interesting. So the turnover element, I know Joe's frustrated with it, and he'll try to cut him moving forward. But we have more to get to on offense, on defense. The Bengals are 7-8. We'll continue our conversation coming up next. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250. That's $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. I heard that 250 number, and I'm thinking, oh, that's Joe Burrow's passing yards in 7 straight games. First quarterback in NFL history to do that, plus 3 touchdowns in 7 straight. So maybe you think he's going to make it 8 straight. Well, you could go to FanDuel right now, FanDuel.com, join today, get that $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins, and you can wager on the Bengals against the Broncos, whether it's prop bets, parlays, money lines, anything in between. Go to FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
James, some contributions from the youth on the defensive side of the ball. Let's wrap up some thoughts on offense and shout out some guys on the defensive side of the ball here to finish up the show. My final thought on the offense is now eluding me. What was it going to be? The offensive line topic, I think, will definitely bear watching, right? When Amarius Mims went down, 1, interesting conversation on the sideline. 2, Devin Cochran immediately hurt his ankle a couple plays later, and it wasn't so severe that he couldn't play through it. Amarius Mims seemed confident in the locker room that he'd be okay. We'll see about that. But if you're talking about down 2 starting offensive tackles with the shaky guard play they've had, that could get treacherous. That could be a concern, to say the least, and is certainly something that we'll be watching this week.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the top storylines, I would say. And the other one is, how close is Orlando? Does Orlando have a shot? Started moving last week. Is there a chance? Is the door slightly open? I don't know. I wonder. Because now we're getting to the point where it's like, all right, well, season's on the line. Can you go? Can you not? But yeah, Marius, having him would be huge. You need him. And the conversation with Frank was interesting. I have no idea what to make of it. I really don't. I don't know what it was. Zach said football gets heated. That's football, man, basically. And so, yeah, which is fine.
I don't know that there's a ton there. It could just be he wanted to go into the game and there was a risk of re-injury and he was being cautioned by his coach and he really wanted to go back in. It could be the opposite. We have no idea. It could have been none of the above. It could have been about something totally unrelated. We really.
I want McDonald's for dinner. I want IHOP.
I mean,
I want McDonald's.
It was clearly related to the game because Zach went and talked to Marius afterward. So it was something like after that timeout with 3 seconds left, which Kevin Stefanski not calling a timeout to apply significantly more pressure to force a punt is just malpractice from the Cleveland sideline. By the way, letting them run the clock down to 3 seconds, have a relatively risk-free field goal attempt. Terrible. But at the time they took that. Yeah, Cade York bouncing back, missing the 47-yarder, making the 59-yarder. But after that timeout was called is when Zach, I think somebody told him, hey, go talk to Amarius. You can kind of see the interaction unfold on the broadcast. And then he goes and talks to Amarius for like 15 seconds, 15 seconds on the sideline there after that timeout. So whatever it was significant enough to warrant a conversation. But Amarius also fired up after the game. Hopefully he can get back. That is a big piece. Obviously, he's really coming to his own as a pass blocker, I think, and continues to get better as a rookie late in the year.
Yeah, you need him. Need him just like you need these young guys to continue. He's one of the young guys, but he's a young guy that you're definitely banking on. A bunch of other young guys stepped up, made plays. I mean, Chris Jenkins, Mr. 2 sacks, McKinley Jackson, sack. Guys like that, like you would love for those guys, because this is back-to-back weeks now for McKinley, where it's like, all right, well, it's interesting. You know, Chris Jenkins, I feel like, has flashed over the past few weeks. And so I like what I'm seeing from them from a production standpoint. You hope it continues. Obviously, Trey needed to get a sacker to keep his NFL lead. And you know he's thinking about that. Joseph Osai had the other sack. So this defense with some big sacks. A lot of that does have to do with DTR, though. I'm not going to lie to you.
Yeah. DTR holding on to the ball, trying to escape pockets where there aren't escape lanes. Like some of these aren't clean wins per se, but there's still production plays that you take. There's still plays these guys are making. McKinley Jackson and Chris Jenkins both had quality sacks. I wouldn't go so far as to call them like elite sacks or anything like that. Like they're not Geno Atkins out there, obviously, right? Geno was fairly singular. They're not getting that level of play, but getting 3 sacks out of your rookie DTs is a great day. Getting a forced intentional grounding from Cedric Johnson in his limited snaps. He played 6 snaps. That's awesome. Getting those kinds of plays from young guys. Joseph Osai had the second most pressures for the Bengals on the day with 5 to Trey Hendrickson's 6. Obviously, he had a sack. Miles Murphy with 3 pressures, a number of pass rush wins that didn't result in pressures, had a pressure that led to one of those Trey Hendrickson sacks. They're getting play from those young guys. And you mentioned earlier that Geno Stone continues to be opportunistic. And I think the bounce back game for Jordan Battle after he dropped the ball crossing the goal line was very encouraging to see, including collecting an interception off of that Geno Stone blitz. And the last one, Mike Hilton, not a young guy, but Mike Hilton had a couple of plays that could have been sacks. They were instead called tackles for loss. I guess they were ruled running plays, but another awesome game for Mike Hilton as a blitzer where he's just been on a heater in the last few weeks.
And that is something to watch. Better believe they want to use that against a guy like Bo Nix, who's a rookie playing on the road. And so, yeah, Mike Hilton has been clutch. They need that to continue. They need this opportunistic defense where the DJ Ivy bats the ball up, nice PBU, and Geno Stone is there for the interception. Those are the things. That's the formula. And going back to our debate or whatever you want to say it was, that's what, can they bottle that and have some of that on the sideline on Saturday, which is going to be here before we know it. Can they do that? And then can that carry over? Because if so, this could be a good football team and not just one of these awful teams. They need help. We'll go over the playoff implications when everything's settled on tomorrow's show. But yeah, can they bottle that? Can these young guys continue the production? Can Geno Stone, Mike Hilton, and the rest of these guys that have made plays? Heck, I thought Cam Taylor-Britt had a shot in an interception today. He just didn't know the ball was there because it was just a really bad ball. So, or a bad play by the receiver, one of the two. But yeah, these guys have had chances. So hopefully they could continue to take advantage of them.
Yeah, that will be critical. Bo Nix has taken care of the ball, I think, pretty well this year. Joe Burrow mentioned that he'd been impressed with Bo Nix earlier in the year. He looks like certainly a competent NFL quarterback and a well-run football team in Denver. A great offensive line there, much stiffer test in the trenches for the Bengals, really on both sides next week. But again, we'll have plenty of time to get into that. My last thought on this game was I was glad to see, even though it was a garbage time play, I love seeing Jamar Chase on a free play, one of 2 free plays for the Bengals in this game, or 2 offsides penalties anyway, that the Bengals drew in this game. Joe Burrow finding Jamar Chase for that cherry on top, 32 extra yards, an extra touchdown, an extra catch in a game that Jamar only had 6 catches, which I think he's still fine in terms of his lead for the Triple Crown. Amon-Ra St. Brown, last time I looked, only had 5 catches as well. So I think he's maintained his lead in those categories relatively well, but it was nice to see that little bit of extra for that Triple Crown stat chasing for Jamar Chase. And you mentioned earlier all the records they set on offense.
Yeah. It's wild to watch those guys. It can happen out of nowhere, and it's going to need to keep happening. They need to keep it up. They need to play at a high level for this team to have a chance. They do have a chance. And again, shout out to Cade York. How are you going to miss the 47-yarder? That didn't really look close. Like, didn't really feel like it was close, and then just drill the 59-yarder, tie Evan McPherson for the franchise lead. Like that's crazy, but that's what it is. And the Bengals, that was a big play, by the way.
A lot of scrutiny on the decision to kick the field goal and not go for it there too. Like they didn't get any yards on the second down play. They throw incomplete to the wide open T. Higgins on the scramble drill on 3rd down, and a lot of people really wanted the Bengals to go for it there. Especially
on the 47-yarder?
The 47-yarder, yeah.
Oh, okay. I was like on the 59. Yeah. I was like the 4th down before with 3 seconds left. You just kick it. Okay, I got you. Yeah. That makes sense because they were rolling. Yeah. Burrow was 8 for 8 before that incompletion to T. I totally would have gotten go for it. I also getting points against a defense that you're probably leery of based on the past, but got to make the kick.
Got to make the kick. And they've had kicking issues this year, whether that was a snap, whether it was just a bad kick. Hard to tell from the outside, right? Whether the rotation was wrong or whatever Darren Simmons is talking about with the rotations on the ball and the long snap. But the Bengals do get the win. They get to 7-8. Their goals are still in front of them this year. They do still need help. They didn't get a whole lot of help as of the time of recording. Still games that haven't finished. We'll catch you up on everything going on with their playoff scenarios and everything on our next show. Until then, thanks for listening to this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Hoo day, and have a good one.